Got 152 yards. Should be just a nice, comfortable 9-iron for him. They're going to go nuts when he hits this thing.
That's dirt.
Yo, yo, yo. Ladies and gentlemen, golf fans of the internet, welcome into the Preferred Lines podcast, where we are the defending, reigning tag team champions of podcasts. Chris Gotterup comes through not only for me, but for my friend John Hazelbauer there. Two-time winners on the pod. John, good evening. Fired up to do this episode. What's going on, brother?
Yeah. Bring me my money. Am I right? It's two times two for Chris Gotterup. We love the meme. We love the SIGs. Smoke if you got them.
Listen,
the two of us got them. I know the people who were following us got them too. It was a Gotterup got them type of week. I said on Twitter, ethical golf prevails. You just cannot get away with that level of ineptitude off the tee and win a PGA Tour event. Talking about Hideki Matsuyama. We'll recap that in a little bit on this show, I'm sure. But it's nice to get on the board, Joe. You know, I did hit at the RSM the last week of last season, and then we didn't have a show afterwards. So we haven't really been able to celebrate a win together in a very long time. So I'm happy to be, on the board with you.
2026 off to a hot start. Got to hit one a month. We'll take 50 to 1. Thank you to Chris Gotterup. As always, got to mention this show proudly presented by the good folks over at Read the Line. If you are not currently subscribed to that YouTube channel, go do that now. There is a free version of the newsletter that Keith puts out each and every week that is maybe the most detailed thing that could possibly appear in your inbox covering golf each and every week. Make sure to do that. Consider the paid sub as well. Proud to be a part of them as always. Got to mention, let's just start with Phoenix. Before we completely victory lap Gotterup, let's just kind of relive what was an unbelievable wild final 18 holes for Hideki Matsuyama. John, where were you at when Hideki hit two fairways, and did you think there was any chance that he was actually going to pull that thing off despite not having his A, B, or C game off the tee in Scottsdale?
Yeah, I was talking with friends, like, do we hedge? What do we do? Because I was on Siwoo and Gotterup, and it seemed the whole day like, Gotterup was out of it, and, you felt that high coming off the first round leader, and it was disappointing ever since. And Siwoo got out to that hot start. So it really looked like I was really just sweating Siwoo. And we got to the last 5 holes, and Siwoo was not birdieing the par 5s. And I'm like, I don't think we can hedge this because the last 2 holes are not bogey holes. They really shouldn't be, especially with, the way guys are just bombing past all the hazards on 18. So I was like, I don't know, guys. I think we just kind of take our L here. There's no point in hedging when we have both Hideki and Thor Bjornsson ahead of us. And Thor Bjornsson makes a, boneheaded mistake on 17. You can't do that. You can't bring that into play.
Yeah.
And Hideki, same thing. Like, just, I know you can't control where the ball's going, but just hit it far enough and block it right. Like, he was doing that earlier in the round. I think on like 10 or 11, where there's a lot of water on the left. He just intentionally blocked it all the way right and actually gave himself a good look. I thought he was going to do that on 18 because if you go right, you're okay. The angles are still fine. And he really put it in the only place you can put that ball where bogey is in play. And once he hit it in those church pews and it rolled back, I was like, okay, it's just, he's going to get every break today. He's not going to get caught up against the lip. But eventually luck caught up to him. He did a little Sahith Travelers 2.0 hitting the lip on 18 where you just need to make a par. I was manifesting that to happen. So you're welcome. I don't think he deserved to win. I think it was a masterclass of scrambling, but he did not play well enough to win, and he had a lot of really lucky breaks go his way. Shout out to Chris Gotterup, birdieing 6 of his last 7, including the playoff, which I think is really just a testament to that course. And, just the TPC layouts, they want to produce this. Like, if you get the hot hand coming in, you can birdie out. They stack those par 5s, a drivable 4, a short 3. If you hit a great drive on 18, that's a birdie op. And he took advantage, so shout out to Chris Gotterup, the deserving winner last week. My heart goes out to the Decky backers, of course. I don't think he deserved it. I think justice was served swiftly on Sunday.
Yeah, the read the line boss, unfortunately, was victim to the Hideki, but we'll take it over here on preferred lines. Obviously, we talked about it on the show, reasons why we liked Gotterup. Number one, we both said this is a tournament that is typically dominated with off the tee play. That's where he excels. I think your correlation between Waste Management Phoenix Open and the Sony Open actually went the stuff between you can't miss left. Many of the things that you brought up actually proved to be true. Joins Hideki and Nick Taylor, as you mentioned, between winners of both events over the last 10 years or so. We talked about avoiding that left miss. Ironically, that was where Hideki ended up losing the tournament, and Gotterup missed the same shot way to the right, was able to get up and down for birdie. So clutch performance, 4 wins, John, since the summer of 2024. Do you know how many PGA Tour players have more wins since then?
I could only think of Scotty.
There's one more, and it's Rory McIlroy. So
yeah.
Go Scotty, Rory, Chris Gotterup as 4-time PGA Tour winners in the last just under 2 years. Unbelievable ascension to the top for him. Really cool that I felt like we were kind of a part of that from what we've seen early on at TGL and correlated to some stuff we saw at the Sony. Great course fit. We called out how he was completely mispriced, sitting next to like Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler and these guys who haven't sniffed a win in 2 years. Was fun to kind of get that victory off the schneid here in 2026.
Yeah, it was. You always want to get on the board early. You don't want to go too long without getting on the board. Then you start second guessing yourself. So hot start. And I also want to add too, I thought his comments in the post game interview were interesting. He obviously showed a lot of emotion out there, but he kind of looks like surprised himself that he's playing as well as he is. And it's like he's clearly the monkey's off his back and he's not killing himself over whether he wins or not. And it's house money, as he's been saying. But I truly think there's like a new level that Gotterup can get to once he really feeds into this confidence that he's having and really commits himself. We talked about in, after the Sony, after his first start, how it came out that he moved to Florida so he could practice more in the off season. So this is year 1 of him practicing in the off season, right? So I actually think, he can go much higher. He can win multiple times in multiple seasons. I'm not going to say he's going to win every single week. But I think he's just kind of scratching the surface of his potential right now.
Other noteworthy things out of players from the WM Phoenix Open. It felt like it was an absolute floor, bottom tier performance out of Scotty Scheffler. It almost felt like that kid in like gym class that just knows he's faster than everyone else and gets a little cocky and like sees how far of a lead he can let other people start and then try to like hawk them down. I think the Atlanta Braves have a thing where like they shoot this Iceman around the outfield to try and catch. Yeah, the freeze. That's what it felt like with Scotty Scheffler. It's like, how big of a lead can I spot the rest of the field and still come back to nearly win the golf tournament? Impressive performance, bringing his worst round in the last couple of years and still finishing top 3. It leads me to believe that he's completely inevitable and probably going to win this week by 4 or 5 shots. If he just plays average one day and then brings the rest of it, it's going to be hard to seriously sift through an odds board and make cases for other players when he's playing at this level and the gap is so enormous between him and the rest of the field. It's impressive, man.
Yeah, that let everybody else get out to a hot start and follow later strategy is actually my Mario Kart strategy. If you've ever tried that, when you get all the good items, you get the first place shells, you forfeit the first lap and then you catch up, you do all your work on second and third. So that's what we saw out of Scotty. It's interesting too, because he had the same sort of tournament as Siwoo, where just awful first round and then turned it back on. And Siwoo's comments afterwards were like, the course was way wetter than I thought, and the overseed, the club was slipping under it, and I wasn't getting good contact. I was second guessing myself. And we saw that with Scotty too, like fumbling some of those chips. Like something was weird with the turf day 1, and then it dried out and he became himself again. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to look out for later on. Like super soft conditions is maybe an issue for Scotty. I don't know. Try to figure out some excuses for me to not bet him, but I believe you took him on head. You took him on head on with Gotterup.
Yeah.
I was a little bit more conservative in the without Scotty Scheffler market last week. Worked out for both of us, and honestly, I think that's a strategy. I don't know if I can do it in limited fields. It makes it really tough, but generally speaking, I don't mind the without Scotty market because the difference is really like I'm gonna have 2 less guys on my card. That's my trade-off. I'm still betting to win the same out. It's just a slightly tighter card where I'm probably gonna have 2 less, like 70-1 guys, and I'm okay making that trade-off when you see how good Scotty has looked so far.
Another interesting correlation early in the season that we brought up, if it ain't Scotty, it's probably a guy playing in TGL.
Yeah.
Another win for the league as I missed my first match of the season tonight where Neil Shipley dunks one on a par 3. Interesting stuff. Obviously, the correlations are there. It was funny. I know Michael Thorne Bjornsson, who it felt like he was going to win this tournament for a little bit, talked about stepping into that environment on 16 and actually mentioned the loud atmosphere of TGL kind of preparing him for that. Although he juiced it over the green, still made par. Ultimately, his undoing came on the next hole. But what do you make of guys kind of blending those experiences together and maybe using it as fuel to back them up in PGA Tour events? Is there anything there?
I would have thought no, but it's kind of hard to ignore how good these guys have been between Gotterup and Rose. And then you mentioned Thor Bjornsson as well, who's right there. Could have just as easily have been Thor Bjornsson as it was Gotterup winning last week's event. So yeah, I mean, you've been in the SoFi Center more than I have, only been the once, but it does simulate that like heart pumping adrenaline. And the guys are saying that like when everybody's watching and there's a stadium around you, you're not getting that simulated adrenaline rush by just hitting shots on the range. So I think there's a little bit of something to call back to. It's simulator golf versus real tournament play. So I don't want to overdo it, but again, it's hard to ignore the correlation of 3 of the first 4 winners being TGL guys and the other one being Scotty.
Yeah. Other storylines this week in the world of professional golf. Liv finally gets their OWGR points. Elvis Smiley wins the first Liv event of the year. The top 10 finishers in each Liv event will now be awarded points for those and potentially give these players like Smiley, like Neiman, like Gooch a pathway into major championships if they play well enough on Liv. Do you deem the ruling fair?
I would say yes and no. I would say ultimately no. I don't actually think it's fair for anyone. I think it's not gonna get the Liv League enough points to sustain the ranking points that they truly should have. So what I mean by that is Rahm and Bryson will continue to not be deemed top 10 players in the world with the world ranking points they're getting. And if those guys are still not being recognized as top 10 players, then what have we really done to fix the issue of before? I do think looking at the quality of the fields that played at Liv Riyadh versus the DP World Tour event, having a comparable amount of points to first place seems generally fair. And Elvis Smiley has shot up pretty high already. So it is actually a pathway. If you're going to win an event or two or contend in a few events, you can get into majors now by winning these events. So for some players to a degree, yes, it is actually meaningful and notable. I think there's still work to be done. I don't blame the OWGR for not bending over backwards to do more for Liv because they've really put an entire paragraph of reasons why they don't deserve the points. Dropping a player just because he's Japanese and not Korean, the limited pathways, the being able to just buy out a guy to come over and not actually have the entire league have to qualify to get in. So I think it's, a fair, like quote unquote fair would have been like if half the players who make the cut on the PGA Tour get points for making the cut, then half of Liv should make OWGR points every week. I think it's fair that they get less than that because they fall short of the criteria in a few other areas. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that's a good take. I think that they deserve something. I want to see. I don't know if it's the right decision for young up and coming stars like Elvis Smiley or like Michael Lasasso to make that career move. But if they do, I can't necessarily blame them for taking the money. And I don't think that it's fair to make that decision if they play great golf and they're beating guys on a week to week basis like Dustin Johnson, like Bryson DeChambeau, like John Rahm, like Joaquin Neiman. If they're able to beat them multiple weeks a year, there should be a pathway to them to play their way into major championships. And now there is. So they didn't fully open the gates. It's kind of like a partial soft opening here, but I think it was ultimately the right move and it had probably been a long time coming for those players. The other news, obviously, you mentioned the DP World Tour. Might as well call it the P. Reed World Tour. His second win of the year, plus the second place. He is owning that tour. I feel like the PGA Tour, as they continue to evolve the rules book, should create some sort of battlefield promotion like they have for the Korn Ferry players, where if you win 3 times in a season on the DP World Tour and want to jump over to the big leagues, come on over. Bring it on. That would mean one more win for P. Reed, and we could maybe see him in the Florida swing before we know it. Awesome stuff out of him. He's playing as good a golf as almost any player in the world right now.
He is. Yeah. I guess by doing that, you would officially cement what is already implied, which is that the DP World Tour has become a feeder tour into the PGA Tour. I mean, they're not hiding behind that because they are sending away their 10 best players every single year. So, I mean, that would just be the final piece of it, right? You're just going to follow the same kind of criteria that the Korn Ferry Tour does. Yeah, I mean, it would be really cool to see Patrick Reed at the Players. He's playing well. Ultimately, we want all the best players playing together again. At least that's going to happen sometime in late summer, fall this year. Now we know that. But it's fun to watch, man. It gets more enticing to, hover over that Masters future for Patrick Reed. But as we keep coming back to, like, I can't in good faith say that Scotty Scheffler is not going to have a better Masters than Patrick Reed. So I'm still not going to be placing any futures as long as there's no without market.
Look, if you miss the first bus into town, it's not always a great idea to take the fourth bus into the same town, right? We missed the 100 and 125 to ones. Those are long gone. So I'm not running to make any P. Reed futures at this point. Other world of golf news that came out this week from a friend that works over at the Golf Channel. I'm going to cue you up for this one, John, because we've spoken about it, and I know we have a similar take here. March is Major, the new official marketing scheme from the PGA Tour, and they deploy one of their key assets in Brandel Chambly to push this narrative that it belongs as a major championship. He went as far as to say it is better and more competitive than the other 4 majors. Go ahead, go off, King. March Players Championship, major worthy or no?
No, it's of course it's not. Absolutely not. I mean, it's a little bit of like we're teetering on Skip Bayless' first take, standing on the soapbox and just saying ridiculous thing for reaction out of Brandel. Which is kind of like what he does, and he's drawn a bunch of attention, and we're talking about it now. So job well done by him. But, a major is all undisputed. If you win a major, it's undisputed. You beat everybody. There's nobody who can say in the history of time that you are not deserving of that major championship. And that is just currently not the way that the golf world works, where you can only play in the Players if you play on the PGA Tour. In years past, that meant that was the culmination of you've risen the ranks. You're playing on the best tour in the world where all the best are playing. By playing the Players as a full field of 156 players who qualified by being the best on the PGA Tour. And that argument had some legs under it, because if you compared the Players to the US Open, there's open qualifying. you can play against amateurs in that field. It's not the 156 best. PGA Championship, there's a lot of PGA professionals in there, right? So it's not top to bottom a great field. Same thing with the Open, the RNA qualifying. Same thing as the US Open. You're going to have some random guys in there. Top to bottom, 1 to 156. The Players was the most competitive event. There was an argument to be made for it, but not now. Not with Liv. I mean, without question, if John Rahm is not playing in the Players, if Bryson DeChambeau is not playing in the Players, even Neiman and Hatton, you throw those guys in, I would go as far as to say there's 20 guys on Liv that should be in the Players field that are better than the field depth that the PGA Tour has now. And as each year goes on with players leaving for Liv, the Players field is actually getting worse and worse. So no, it's not a major. I will make a concession and say that the Players is in fact the PGA Tour's major. And if they want to hang their hat on that, that's fine. Because if you're a PGA Tour member, everybody is playing in this event. And it's the only full field event that everybody's playing in it. Now that we have signature events, it actually creates this like pedestal to put the players on, because Pebble Beach, yes, we have the 80 best players this week as a signature event, but you have pound for pound 1 to 156, the best you can get on the PGA Tour in the Players. So it will be a more impressive win to win that than any other event on the schedule. So I will end it by just saying, let's call the Players the PGA Tour's major. That's fine. The fifth major, no, can't do it.
Yeah, the Players is on a pedestal. It's the best PGA Tour event, like you mentioned, that we have all year. I've been to the Players. It's incredible. The golf course is electric. The environment is exceptional. But I think I took exception to 2 points he made, and I'm glad, obviously, it was on sort of their live from set, and I understand what he was trying to do here, and I'm certainly glad it made its rounds through my Twitter, because Mr. Chambly has had me personally blocked for several years after I took exception to another take he had where he tried to say Brooks Koepka had zero chance of winning the Masters, that Brooks ultimately finished second at the Masters that year. So he's not always had the hottest of runs with these electric takes of his, but obviously exception number one, basically that it's the deepest and best field in golf. It simply cannot be. I can understand and appreciate the fact that guys 60 through 125 in the field may be the best, but you're missing the third and fourth best player in the world, in my estimation, and you might be missing the fifth best now in Patrick Reed. The other thing that I took exception to was it's the best golf course of anyone that has played throughout the season, and Augusta National should be absolutely turning over and banning him from coming back there, because you cannot say that TPC Sawgrass and Augusta National are two equivalent pieces of property and iconic destinations in the world of United States golf. So yeah, outrageous take. I think it did its job. Not only are we talking about it, every other podcast in the world is having a take about it, saying that he's completely wrong on this. So congrats to Brandel. Job well done. You have made the internet upset, which I think is ultimately the goal in many of his appearances on TV.
Yes.
Let's do a little bullish or bearish, John. Things that we're buying, things that we're selling this week in the world of professional golf and golf adjacency. I will let you start this week. Let's begin with a little positivity after that last segment. What are you buying in terms of this week in the world of golf?
Yeah, this take is a little bit intuitive, but I think this week especially it bears repeating. And so I'm bullish on driving distance. I'm bullish on players on the PGA Tour who have that extra gear, that have the option to bomb it when they want to and lay back and hit a really long driving iron when they don't need to. And I bring this up now for two reasons. One, because I was sweating both Siwoo and Gotterup go through the same stretch of holes and really come to the realization, like, some of these holes are only birdie opportunities for Gotterup, or some of these holes are only eagle opportunities for Gotterup. And you look at Siwoo, and he's a marksman. I think he was number one in the tournament in driving accuracy last week. But he's hitting like long irons and 3-woods into these par 5s, and he's just not able to hold the greens. And he's playing alongside Thor Bjornsson, who's mashing it like 50 yards past him and hitting 8-iron into par 5s and flagging them, right? So that in and of itself, even if the course isn't Torrey Pines, it's still going to create eagle opportunities, which was the difference between Thor Bjornsson up until the end. He made his own mistakes, but he put himself in position to pass Siwoo pretty easily because of the distance.
Yeah.
And then you look at the leaderboard at the end of the day, and it's Gotterup, it's Højgaard, it's Thor Bjornsson, even Hideki's plus in driving distance. You look at what happened to 18 this year. I know there was a lot of like architecture purists hating on it, and I totally agree with that take. Like 18 used to be a really interesting and dramatic finishing hole, and now you can literally just take aim and above the water. The water's not in play for anybody who can carry it 300 yards. And, you know, you saw that with everybody except Hideki, just aim right and hit it far. That was the difference. Like Gotterup made birdie on 18, the last hole in regulation, just by hitting it as far as he could into the rough and having a wedge from the rough to the pin. So that's number one, why I'm bullish on driving distance. And number two, which we'll talk more about this when we get into the Pebble preview, but Rory McIlroy just brought this course down to its knees last year. He took angles that people didn't realize you could take, and he did it for the second year. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I love seeing some of the heat maps of where his ball was and where everybody else was, because people weren't even thinking to take the angles that he's taking, and they are capable of it. But I feel like he's kind of opened up Pandora's box now, where we might be losing Pebble's identity a little bit because these driving distance guys are going to go a little crazy. So I just want to bring that up this week, because a lot of people are going to see Pebble. They're going to see 6,900 yards and say, all right, this is the chance for the Morikawas and the Henleys of the world. And that's not the way I'm going this week. If you have distance, that is a tool in your tool belt that other people don't have. It gives you a distinct advantage, especially in a par 72. And I think, just generally speaking, I'm going to be favoring the driving distance guys week over week now, instead of the accuracy specialists.
All right, John's buying driving distance. Here's what I'm buying this week, and it's tournament identity. Okay, so I think the Waste Management does about as good a job as anyone on this, creating this environment, and they cultivated this identity for this event. And we love TPC Scottsdale, but it's certainly not a like iconic landmark destination in golf like Pebble Beach or TPC Sawgrass, right? It's just not. Any tournament can do this. You just have to form an identity around your tournament. So they brought in the stadium. They came up with something creative. They came up with a slogan. They built merch around it. They sold fans around it. They sold people on this idea that this tournament is different. And more of these events, I think, need to buy in. It brings me back to our talk about the Players' Championship. You have an identity already. Just stick with it and make it the best you can possibly make it, without trying to change your identity into now becoming a major championship, which means all of a sudden you probably have to make the golf course harder. You have to limit your field when you make it a major championship. Like, just stick with what you've got and make it the best it can possibly be, because you have something that's unique and different. And as we start to approach my home tournament, once my favorite tournament of the year, previously known in a past life as the Honda Classic, but now the Cognizant Classic. Let's get back to an identity for this tournament. You change names. You have what can be one of the most difficult, carnage-inducing stretches in professional golf. That's your identity. Get back to it. Stop overseeding the tournament and letting guys threaten breaking 59 on one of the most difficult courses in golf. I think that each tournament director and the people that work there need to figure out what is the identity of this tournament and start to build marketing campaigns, the way your course setup is structured, everything around what you want to be. And you has to be something that's different than everything else. You can't copy and paste what the Waste Management or what the players did. The tournament at PGA National, I think, once had that. So this is my hope and plea to them to come back and be a part of that journey once again. So Bullish for me. I'm buying tournaments who have created their own identity, John. Let's get to what we're selling this week in pro golf. I'll let you start here. What are you bearish on? What couldn't you stand this week?
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little. It's not even golf adjacent, but it's this weekend adjacent because I'm gonna bring up the Super Bowl. And it has enlightened me that I'm bearish on the franchise quarterback. I'm bearish on sell. If you could get your franchise quarterback and it's Mendoza, you sell anything to get your franchise quarterback. Give up all your firsts this year, next year, all your seconds this year, next year. You don't need it. You got Sam Darnold, a game manager, and an elite defense. If I'm the or the Las Vegas Raiders, I'll take an average veteran quarterback and some depth on the rest of my roster over, dead to rights Fernando Mendoza with nothing else around him. He'll never succeed in that environment. He's years away from having a competitive roster around him. So I would do the opposite. I'm selling that pick. I'm letting somebody else sell the farm so that they can trade up, like the Jets trade up for their franchise quarterback, because I think it's all smoke and mirrors. You need a roster from top to bottom. You need an offensive line, as the Patriots so clearly showed us, having no line to protect their franchise quarterback. He couldn't do anything. Like, they got their guy. They got Drake May, and he couldn't do anything with him because the receivers can't get open and he has no time. So no, I'm completely out on this whole, you get your quarterback and you figure everything else out afterwards because all things come into place. Not true. You can win a Super Bowl with Sam Darnold. You could win a Super Bowl with like Baker Mayfield. You could have won a Super Bowl with Matt Stafford, who could have been picked up by anybody. He wasn't drafted by the Rams, and he became a MVP winner this year because all the other pieces around him were great. So this is my message. I don't care about the Raiders. I'm a Giants fan. But my message to the Raiders would be sell that pick. You don't need Mendoza. He's not the answer. Stock up. You got a lot of holes to fill. Follow what the Seahawks did. Build a roster. Build an identity, like you're saying. It's not just the PGA courses. Have an identity in the front, on defense. Build some sort of identity. Don't just smash the QB button and think your problems are solved.
Selling franchise quarterbacks. Only John Hasselbauer would do it. No, but after 50 years, John, the game is still won in the trenches like we saw last week. Here's what I'm bearish on, and something that annoyed me as someone who is tasked with kind of always looking ahead to the next day and trying to figure out boards and look at matchups and trying to figure out spots where we can have advantageous positions for the people that follow us along on this journey. Can we, at some point, we've got to enforce this idea of an actual shot clock violation. I don't need a timer on the screen, but players need to adhere to this, because when you have a 123-man field and we can't finish a tournament on a Friday, I say this as we start to come into the Florida swing, where it's like almost they can never finish the tournament at Valspar, at Bay Hill, at Honda without it running over into the next day, which totally throws off the competition, because this idea that someone has to stop in the middle of their round, come out early in the morning, go back to the range, tee up, it pushes those other guys back. It's against the spirit of the game, and that rule is in place. Finish your rounds, PGA Tour. Even Hideki on Sunday, the fact they played one playoff hole and almost didn't get that thing in before the Super Bowl was pretty unbelievable and almost a disaster scenario for the PGA Tour. Had Gotterup not made birdie there, and say they both make par, they go back to 17, 18. The Super Bowl's on. Yeah. Everyone's turning that thing off. So they should be thanking Chris Gotterup just as much as we are that he was able to come through in the clutch and make that birdie on the first playoff hole of the day. We need to get these rounds in on the day, especially when they are not full field events. We can't have things slip over into the next day. End the rounds at all costs. If that means guys got to play in the dark, if that means you got to split tees, whatever you got to do, we need the rounds to end on time.
It's a great take. It's so easy for anybody to just put their foot down and say, okay, you're on the clock and you're going to get stroked. They just don't want to enforce it. But you're right. I mean, I could tell on the broadcast, I'm following one group and they're in the middle of the fairway and the other guys are on the tee box, and you just know they're backed up and you know where the backup is coming from. So, yeah, just do something about it.
All right, 30 minutes in, let's shift gears to this week, the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, and as is the case each and every week, we're going to start with the course guide. All right, Johnny, course guide presented by our friends over at GolfGuiders. Download the app now. It has all your GPS needs as well as a complete social interface for you to shop, for you to book tee times, for you to watch YouTube videos, for you to see our show, for you to interact with content each and every week and other people within the app. Go to your app store, download the GolfGuiders app, tell the people over there, the good folks over at Preferred Line sent you. John, I'm going to let you take the reins here because I believe that this course has a special spot in your heart. We're going to Pebble Beach. Tell me all about it.
It does. You know, it's not a coincidence. I'm wearing, I don't know if you connected these dots, but I'm wearing the Gary Woodland 2019 Sunday Volition Puma windbreaker. That was, for people who don't know the lore, 2019 was my first outright that I ever hit betting golf. It was pre PGA Tout days. It was just for the love of the game. I actually bet Gary Woodland and Koepka that week. Those were my only two bets. So some people were saying, you know, prodigy in the making. And here we are today. I hit Gary Woodland 200 to 1, put $10 on it, something like that. Or I think it was a 100 to 1, $10 bet, won $1,000 and bought a set of irons that I still use today. So Gary Woodland has bankrolled my golf clubs, my M5 TaylorMades. So I'll always have a special place in my heart for this event. But Pebble Beach, this event is also the first event that I hit a winner at while documenting my picks as PGA Tout on Daniel Berger in 2021. Then we went back to back on Tom Hoge the year afterwards. I was on Shane Lowry at this event last year, who beat everybody except for Rory McIlroy. So I love this event. And beyond the event itself, I just love the course. I would say of all the courses that we see year in, year out, this is my favorite golf course. It's really controversial for me to say that I like it more than Augusta, but for some reasons, you know, I do actually prefer watching the golf at Pebble Beach more than, you know, take all the pageantry out of the Masters. It's kind of a singular thing. This is a week that I will just watch because I like seeing golf being played at Pebble Beach. The women's had a U.S. Open here. I watched that. Obviously, you have the U.S. Open 2019. You have the U.S. Open here again next year. Yeah. You had the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am before it was a signature event through 2 years ago. Horrible fields. For some monstrosity, atrocities were happening. People were going to the Saudi International instead of this iconic event. And it was awful fields. And, you know, when Tom Hoge's winning, he's beating, like, you know, the journeyman. And it's not as impressive. And then it got this immediate facelift over the last 2 years. Wyndham Clark winning 2 years ago. Rory winning last year, where all of a sudden it becomes a world-class event because it's iconic venue, meets all the best players in the world. So I'm very happy with where we're at now with this event. I do still wish it was 4 rounds at Pebble. I'm not crazy about the rotating course thing. I don't need it. I don't know how you feel about that. I'm happy to not have a 3-course rotation. We dropped Monterey Peninsula. Now it's just Spyglass, which is a fine course. How do you feel about the rotating course situation here?
I think it's a necessity because of the Pro-Am format, or else we wouldn't finish these rounds in. So the fact that they aren't willing to relinquish that part of the identity of this tournament with Bill Murray's and your CEOs and your Condoleezza Rice's and all the people that want to play this tournament, it's kind of the reality of the situation. But great weekend viewing, as you mentioned. The first 2 days will be competed. Players will rotate between Pebble Beach and Spyglass Hill. They will then play the final 2 rounds without the AMs on Pebble Beach over the weekend. 2 of the shorter courses that we see on the PGA Tour, obviously very pesky POA greens. You have the smallest greens on tour and some of the most difficult to hit on the PGA Tour. Pebble has hosted U.S. Opens. This tournament typically plays significantly easier because of the influx of amateurs and 10 handicaps that are competing alongside them. They have to keep the legitimacy of the tournament intact, and they can't have these guys make an 8 on every single hole. I did want to bring up some of the data golf stuff from last year as we kind of look to see what the path to victory was for someone like Rory McIlroy. You mentioned he essentially bludgeoned driver on unimaginable lines over dog legs at Pebble Beach that completely brought this course to its knees, to the tune of #1 in strokes gained off the tee. I can't imagine that off the tee has been like the #1 predecessor for victory at here many times. But one of the big things that you do see, given the length of the course, is the influx of approach shot distribution from inside 150 yards. If you can follow my mouse here, if you're with us on the live stream or YouTube, you will see that nearly 49%, half of the approach shots come from within 150 yards, which is pitching wedge range for PGA Tour pros. So hit it in the fairways, try to stick your wedges close on these tiny little greens, and putt it well on the tricky POA grass, particularly in the afternoon. And that seems to be like the key factors here, as around the green historically hasn't mattered as much at this golf course. Anything to add there stat-wise that you see is super important? I know you got to tackle the par fives too as well, with a 4 over at Pebble. Rory made 2 eagles last year at Pebble Beach, which helped him unlock, those super low scoring rounds. I think he also made a hole-in-one at Spyglass last year.
Yes, he did.
So, I mean, you make a couple eagles on these very gettable par fives, and you're in good shape to shoot a super low score.
Yeah, definitely. It's the shortest par 72 on the PGA Tour. And so that means we are getting 4 par 5s. There's also some really short par 4s here. It is known to be a lesson driver course, which obviously we talked about Rory kind of laughing at the idea of that and lapping the field off the tee. But there's one hole, I believe it's the eighth hole, the cliff hole that Jordan Spieth almost fell down. Okay. That you cannot drive the ball more than like 220, 230 on that hole. Yeah. And I think it's largely because of that one hole that this course averages the lowest driving distance of any course on tour for par 4s and 5s. Just because, it's not every hole is a forced layup and a dog leg, and there's a lot of holes that you can cut off distance and cut off dog legs on. The 14th hole, par 5, that's the hole that Rory really took the aggressive line on. That's actually a hole that really hardly anybody in this field can even challenge to get 2 and 2. Yeah. And that's why Rory had such an advantage last week, because he cut off that angle and he was able to get there in 2 when no one else could. So something to keep in mind. Rory's interesting. This is not the type of course that you think of for him. And honestly, neither is Sawgrass, where he's won twice, but he's really shown us recently that he navigates the short positional courses quite well. 2 other quick course notes for this year. They pushed the tee box on the 6th hole par 5 back by about 17 yards. So that maybe is a little bit of an extra club into that hole that could make a difference. Advantage again to the longer hitters. And it's been an incredibly dry season in Monterey Peninsula. So this has always been inundated with flooding, really bad weather leading into this event the last few years, where it was borderline not playable, and quite the opposite this year. They haven't gotten any rain. So it's going to be extremely firm and fast, which I believe is going to make this course play significantly harder when you're hitting into very small greens that are super firm and fast.
Yeah, I can remember years back, even when like Phil was playing here, where he would like talk about Pebble, and you would notice that like when the ball would hit the green with like a wedge, many times they were so soft and receptive almost because of the conditions that they would spin all the way off the front of the green, because many of them are canted from back to front as well. So there were times when I can remember Phil hitting like a 3/4 8-iron, like 150 yards into holes, just because to try to control the spin and access some of those back pin locations. So it will be really interesting to see if they can kind of firm this place up this week a little bit. It's interesting. The other note you mentioned of like, one of the trends I've noticed is a lot of times our mind immediately goes to, okay, this course is sub 7,200 yards. That brings into play the shorter hitters like Russell Henley and like, JJ Spawn and Colin Morikawa and these guys. But a lot of times it kind of works the other direction. Like if you look at some of Rory's best starts, they were on relatively short golf courses. And even, the Masters has turned into a short course for him. Like JJ Spawn wins the US Open at a crazy long golf course. Harris English is winning at Torrey Pines, the longest course on tour. Justin Rose is winning at Torrey Pines. And you get like Cam Young winning at short courses. So sometimes that narrative that we're predisposed to thinking of, like, okay, this course is really short, that's going to advantage some of the guys who don't hit it as far. Many times that ends up actually working in the opposite direction, which may be something to consider when looking at matchup options or DFS plays for this week. Without further ado, unless you got anything else on the course, I'm going to bring up the board this week. We'll talk through the odds.
Yeah, I do actually want to say one more thing. Yeah. And no disrespect to Justin Rose, but I think this underscores how much this tournament has changed when it went from the year that Justin Rose won in 2023, 2024 and 25 were signature events. I'm going to read off the top 5 plays that Justin Rose beat in 2023. Brendan Todd, Brandon Wu, Peter Malnati, Danny McCarthy, no shade, Keith Mitchell, Ryan Moore, no longer in the league. Shout out
tournament, man.
Shout out True, but not in the league anymore. So it's a different event. If you have poor course history here, I'm really knocking you because you're not going up against much at this event. If you have good course history, that's fine. But I'm really looking at these last 2 years when you've gone up against some real dragons.
Good point. 3rd year in signature event status. That changes the game. That changes the top of the odds board. Let's pull up some picks. All right, here we go. Top of the odds board. We get Scotty Scheffler at 3-1 to win the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Rory makes his 2026 season debut, 14-1. Whoa, had to check my eyes in the odds board there for a second when I see Si-Woo Kim. He's played great, but 3rd on the board at 25-1. Victor Hovland, 27. Justin Rose, now up to number 3 in the world at age 45. 26 years after making his professional debut in golf, he is now number 3 in the world. That is quite an accomplishment and remarkable for Justin Rose. 28-1, Tommy Fleetwood. 30-1, Xander Schauffele. Those are the top contenders by the sports books. John, what are you thinking?
Okay, so it always starts with Scheffler. What do we do with Scotty? It's an 80-man field. For better or worse, I can't bet without Scotty. I'm going to be betting a card of 2 or 3 guys. I don't want to do it. So I have to take him on. I'm not saying, there's a reason that I feel like he's not going to win this week. If I did, it would be that he hasn't won this event yet. He's typically avoided this event up until it became a signature event. I don't think his POA numbers are fantastic if we're grasping at straws here. And the last thing I would say is that variables and Scotty don't get along great. The 2 worst major finishes of Scotty's career were at Southern Hills and Pinehurst, those are like the only 2 events that he's played poorly in as far as majors go. And there's unpredictability there. If the weather comes up and there's a wave disadvantage or something, I feel a little bit more confident taking on Scotty. All of that said, nobody's better equipped to handle those conditions than him. If you need a flighted, shot under the wind, he has those shots. If you need to scramble in tough conditions, he obviously has that. I could see him struggling on these greens. Just with it being POA. So I'm going to take him on. And Rory is really interesting to me, Joe. 14 is a longer number than what I expected. He's the defending champ here. He's looked fine on the DP World Tour. I know he's making his first start this week. We typically would have seen him sooner, but it's not like he's been doing nothing. He's been active at TGL. So the TGL trend can continue if he pulls it off this week. I'm really thinking about him because the other guys on this list are not popping out to me. And I know that he has this other gear on the theme of driving distance that gives him such an advantage at this course that we didn't think was possible before. And some of these adjustments to the course of pushing tee boxes back, like I think a lot of people are going to follow what he did last year. Maybe he loses an edge to a degree that way. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on Rory? Because this is our first time really being able to talk about him this year.
Surprised by the gap between him and Scheffler, and I think it illustrates, we think of like the big two right now in pro golf, but if you look at the odds board, they don't think it's a big two. They think it's a big one,
Yeah.
right? They're basically saying that Scheffler has about 25% of the win equity, and Rory has somewhere around like 7-8%, given these odds. So very interesting there. I think, obviously, coming off a dream year for McIlroy, you win. It all started here, right? It all started here, and then he wins the Players, and then he wins the Masters, and then he wins the Irish Open, and then he wins the Ryder Cup, and it was arguably a better year top to bottom in terms of the highs than Scotty Scheffler had. But what does he have left in the tank, right? Can he still have that same motivation to go toe to toe with Mike Tyson for another year? That's my biggest question here. I don't know. I'm not real interested in betting him this week. My eyes shift down into some of that high 20 range instead, but I can see why people would totally make the case for him, and the odds in comparatively to Scheffler, it feels like a value proposition.
Yeah. He did start his season here last year. So this was his first PGA Tour event. He came out the gates hot. He was coming from the Hero Dubai. He had a better finish there last year than this year. So it seems like that was all putting this year. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm just leaning that way almost because the other guys on this page aren't really jumping out to me as much. With Siwoo, maybe the hottest guy outside of Scotty Scheffler, just continues to rinse and repeat. Great ball striking. Putting under pressure seems to be a concern, and I'm worried about it on POA. So, I was just on him a week ago. I'm not saying he's a poor play, but as the third man on the board, that's a little jarring to me as well. Hovland, I want to talk about him as well because he's
let's talk about him.
Flavor of the week. And I don't totally get it because his history at this event isn't great. I know he's generally a great coastal player and a good wind player. He's talked a lot about that. Even at his last win at Valspar, he talked about the winds and being able to flight balls a certain way. So I get that. And he was pretty good last week, but he made some crucial errors. I think short game is really important. The smaller that the greens get, I know that hasn't necessarily correlated that way looking down the list, but I just think generally I want to see a reliable short game, especially with the wind too. So I'm not really understanding the Hovland thing. Where are you at with Hovland?
Well, let me just build a case for him if I were to bet him. You mentioned a couple of things. Yes, the recent course history is not great, although you go back to the 2018 U.S. Open. Was that it? Was that the year that Gary won?
19.
The year that Gary won, low am in the field that week. And you go back the year before that, and he won the U.S. Am that was held at Pebble Beach. So really good lineage throughout his very early stages of his career. I thought that 9 under on the weekend last week was pretty promising. He looked to continue to build and get a little bit better each round in his first PGA Tour event of the season. Let me just give me 1 second to bring up his kind of profile page here. Here we go. And this is the one interesting thing that I wanted to show you via our friend Rick Gaiman. So this is his last couple of tournaments. So some solid starts on the DP World Tour that many aren't seeing. T5 at the BMW, T6 in India, 23, 14th. But John, look at this around the green stuff.
Yeah.
Has Victor Hovland quietly kind of fixed his chipping a little bit? I mean, the approach play stuff is phenomenal, which we know typically dominates in Pebble. 4.7 on approach last week at the Waste Management. There's a 6-stroke on approach. I mean, he's averaging somewhere around 2 to 3 strokes on approach per event. But if he can fix this around the green stuff, I am confident he hit a couple of bad tee shots that this number is a little bit skewed from last week. We know what he can do off the tee. We know what he can do from a ball striking perspective. And we know that he can get a streaky, hot putter, 6 strokes, 3.6. If he can fix this chipping, and if that was a focus of his offseason, clearly it's showing in some of those early results and could be very promising in terms of a big leap year for Viktor Hovland as he kind of ascended in 2024. Not very good last year, with the exception of the one sort of random sprinkled in win at the Valspar. I do feel like, looking at those recent results, he's trending in a very positive direction. And on paper, this feels like a decent fit for his style game.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I feel like he's one of the more popular bets this week, and I see that number and I say I think that's a fair spot for him to be. But I didn't see it and say, oh, we got to jump on this before that number, isn't there anymore. But I understand the case for Victor. I love him. He's one of my favorite players. I root for him for sure. The rest of this board, the rest of this page, Xander shouldn't be 31 at this point. I mean, maybe you have to put him there because of the name, but nobody's betting him at 30-1. Tommy, interesting. Like, maybe consensus third best player on the PGA Tour going into this season, and now maybe Gotterup and Rose are making people feel otherwise. I'm not there on it. I like him in the wind. Results haven't really been there here. Hasn't had the best last couple of starts. So I'm kind of like lukewarm on Fleetwood. But I don't want to spend too much time on this page, but I also want to have the Rose conversation because he's coming off of one of the most dominant 4 rounds of golf I've ever seen on California POA. He's staying in California. And he's number 1 in course history here by a pretty significant margin, and won here 3 appearances ago. 28-1 is short for Rose, but he's also a top 5 player in the world right now. So I don't actually think that's a short number for somebody who is deservedly playing like a top 5 player on the PGA Tour, at least. So I'm thinking about it at 28, to be honest with you. What do you think about Rosie?
It's fair. More than fair. You mentioned obviously the win here a few years ago. Obviously, that was a much different strength of field that week, but has backed that up with really solid performances throughout his career at this tournament, including a third at the U.S. Open when it was held here that Gary Woodland year. So very solid course history for Rosie. Obviously, in some of the best form of his life right now. He's super accurate. Like, I don't feel like there's many holes in his game at this point where he's going to like start losing it off the tee like we saw from Hideki Matsuyama, or start hitting loose iron shots into bunkers and short-siding himself and making tactical decisions that are incorrect. He's too smart of a player at this point of his career, which I think in turn elevates his status as a 28-1 play.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, we've seen veterans just kind of plot their way around here. So it's kind of a strategist course as well.
Yes.
And he has so much more experience as one of the few guys who played this routinely pre-signature event days.
Yeah. All right, let's pull up slide 2, see if we got anyone. There's a guy we like. Just hit him last week. He's back in the field this week at 35-1, Mr. Chris Gotterup. You get Matsuyama, Henley, McNeely, Cam Young, all at that price. Jake Knapp comes in at 38-1. You get Bobby Mack, Ludwig Oberg, Michael Thorbjornsen, Ben Griffin, Matt Fitzpatrick, Patrick Cantlay, Jason Day, all in the 40s there, John. Any early plays here for you out of this range, or players that you're drawn to?
Yeah, I mean, Gotterup's very interesting. Can he win 3 times in 4 starts? It feels unlikely. I mean, even again, going back to that post-game interview, like, he seems surprised by the success that he's having. But he shouldn't be. He's a great player. I like great driving distance, or great total driving, which he might be, outside of Rory, maybe the best total driver on tour right now. That plays anywhere, and that will give him an advantage here. He plays that stinger that we know that's going to help in the wind. That helped him at the Sony Open, in coastal courses. So he's kind of answered all the questions you might have. I don't actually think they've even tightened his number here at 35, which is interesting. Like, he should be shorter than Xander. I don't think that's crazy. Like, people would be betting him shorter than Xander, I believe, this week. I'm not going to get there. If he wins back-to-back weeks, good on him. I don't need to be there twice. I certainly understand the play. I mean, McNeely's interesting. We all know the Pebble Beach ties. He literally grew up on Pebble Beach, plays this event very well, has been playing very well. I think 35 is a little bit short for me. The only guy that I will probably be betting on this page is Robert McIntyre.
Same.
So it's Pebble Beach Golf Links, and it's Pebble Beach Golf Links for a reason. people don't associate Pebble Beach as a links course because it's short and it's positional and it's sort of tight, but honestly, it's not even that tight. Like the landing areas are pretty generous. It's a strategist course. It's a combating the wind course. It's hitting strategic flighted ball striking shots and getting a hot putter. And these are all the things that Robert McIntyre does well. These are all the reasons that I was very high on Shane Lowry last year at this event. And you look at the podium at the 2025 AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, it's Rory first, Lowry 2, Rose 3. So there's something to be said about these Europeans with links experience at Pebble Beach. And McIntyre is a top 10 player in the world as well. I was very high on him a couple weeks ago. He was T4 at the Sony Open, played well in coastal conditions, came up just short to Gotterup. But he's a great wind player. We know there's going to be wind out there. Just continues to bring it every week. He's a gamer. If he's in the mix, on Sunday, you have some confidence that he can hang with guys like a Scheffler down the stretch. So I like him. I think 40 is what I got him at. That's the only bet I've made so far, but I have high hopes for McIntyre this week.
Yeah, I think I bet him as well at 40. My only concern is not a ton of history on POA or really playing California golf, which could be an interesting element. But obviously the links connection there, beyond the early start, like the very nice start to the beginning of his season at the Sony Open, won the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship in October. Played very good in his other 2 DP World Tour starts to end that season. Just a class player that I really kind of trust his ability to scramble and putt his way to a victory and play in any of those elements. The other interesting one for me, and I saw 40-1 and actually grabbed a piece of it this morning, was on Jake Knapp. Really good run of starts to begin his season. 11th, 5th, and 8th in 3 starts. He's been absolutely dialed in off the tee. That fairway finder that's also moving like 188 mile an hour ball speed with effortless power is really dialed in for Jake Knapp right now. He sits just behind Gotterup in strokes gained off the tee to start the season. He also is a tremendous putter on POA. I have him the 3rd best putter in this field inside of 15 feet on POA grass. So that's the range that gives a lot of people problems. That's the range where Jake Knapp has been excelling so far in his career. And the final piece that I wanted to kind of touch on is I mentioned earlier in the show the ability to dominate and dismantle the par 5s and really turn these into legitimate eagle opportunities. Jake Knapp can do that on both courses. He leads all players over the last 40 rounds in par 5 scoring. 3 good starts to the year, 3 important stat categories that I'm looking for this week. He's playing really well at, and I think comfortable out there playing West Coast California golf where he grew up as well. A nice position here where I think he may be able to peel off a big one at 40-1.
Yeah, shout out the Anaheim Ducks. I don't understand how he's like sponsored by them, but he's always repping the Ducks. So we know he loves California. Yeah, no, I get the play, and obviously he went through a lot of terrible, personal things in the offseason. So it's great to see him get off and get back to like an even elevated version of himself, and get back focused on golf because he's looked really sharp to start the year.
Page 3. Here's all of our long shots. Not going to list them all off, John, but before we get out of here tonight, anyone that has your attention further down the board, if it ain't Scotty, if it ain't Rory, maybe it can be one of these guys. Who do you see that has a shot?
Yeah, I'll start with one guy that I will bet as a long shot who's even off of this board, which is hard to imagine in a field of just 80 that you can find a viable long shot. But Hisatsune, 150-1, coming off back-to-back top 10s where he's gaining off the tee approach around the green and putting at the Farmers and the Phoenix Open. It's not like these are dud events. These are against good fields. He didn't have the best performance on Sunday last week, but he's playing with his lifelong idol, in the same group. That's like a kind of different level of starstruck environment. He's won at Le Golf National in 2023. He was Player of the Year on the DP World Tour. 2 seasons ago. So he's got pedigree and he's young. He's 23. He's getting better. He was in the mix at the Valspar, which is a decent comp as a windy positional course. So I don't think that was a flash in the pan what we saw last week. I think he could have a good year, and it's 150. So he's my favorite value this week in a signature event format. That's tough to find values. Other names I'll just rattle off that I like here. Pearson Coody, who just
awesome.
Same age as Gotterup, kind of off to the same start as Gotterup. Like he's been a factor in every event this year. So I'm thinking about Coody. I'm not going to say Morikawa's name, even though he's 66 to 1. Like I'm good there. And yeah, I would say Michael Kim would be one other guy I'll throw out. A California guy, had the second best approach performance of his career at this event the last time he played it. And he's coming off of a win in Europe a few starts ago. So might have a new version of Michael Kim this week. He's got a pretty good number, somewhere around like 125, I believe you can find him. So those are the long shots I'm looking at. What about you?
A couple of ones, and one at the top of the list here that I want to hear from, or I want some news to come out this week regarding the withdrawal last week, because I think this is a misprice if he's healthy, and it's JJ Spawn. I had remember early in the season when we were like, who's going to have the best year, Henley, Spawn, or Ben Griffin, right? And we're like 2 weeks later, and those guys are essentially the same price, and JJ Spawn is now double their number, even more, 2.5x the Henley number. He's in California. This is a tournament where he's going to hit a lot of wedges, and he's one of the streakier putters that you can imagine on the PGA Tour. And a guy with winning pedigree that has won U.S. Opens, now going to a course that is a regular host within the U.S. Open Rota, where he plays his best golf. I have interest in JJ Spawn. I want to know more about why he withdrew and if he's healthy. And the first thing that came to my mind is like, is he going to show up as part of the High Flyers or something, like Live Riata? I'm like, no, we lost JJ Spawn, but I saw the withdrawal. So I want to hear more about JJ Spawn. But the one guy that I did take, who I think is playing really well right now, was the last person to get into this field via the Aon Swing 5, and he needed a good Sunday in Phoenix to make it happen, and that's Sahith Theegala. Theegala's playing good again. I keep bringing back the linkage to TGL, but he's talked about how important it is and how excited he is for this season because he's finally healthy again. Now, Sahith has been quite terrible off the tee, but I think this is a course where there's room to spray it a little bit if you're creative, and ultimately is one around the greens in most cases, and he's got one of the most creative and soft set of hands on the PGA Tour, and he's crushing it right now with the putter, and obviously comfortable over there in California as well. Really good starts for Theegala. 8th at the Amex, 7th at the Farmers, 18th last week at the WM Phoenix Open. He's gained over 10 strokes putting in his last couple of events. Really solid on approach last week in Phoenix as well. If he can just avoid like the Pacific Ocean, I think he can comes comfortably inside the top 10 and potentially make a run at this thing, which I think gives him a lot of upside considering, and he's in triple digits.
Yeah, I mean his course history here, the off the tee numbers have been bad every time, but it's almost like a Hideki Matsuyama situation last week where he's not even aiming for the fairways anymore, and he knows coming in with not the best off the tee form that he could just miss over here, and the strokes gain is not necessarily going to reflect that, but he's playing the course the way he wants to. Really inspiring starts of the year for him with 3 straight top 20s to kick off the year. And I know he's looked a lot better in TGL too. So I think we're getting a different version of Theegala to start this season than a couple of years in the past.
As always, for both of us, full cards out on Wednesday. We'll see if one of us or both of us can go back to back. It sounds like if Bob Mack wants to do it this week, we might have a party next week on the show and tag team it twice in a row. John, any parting words before we get out of here this evening?
No, I would just say, this week live from the Tout House, I am going to, do that later tonight in this outfit. I'm cheating. I'm leaving the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am and I'm going to the US Open. I'm teasing a little Gary Woodland.
Are you gonna chip off the green?
You got it.
Yeah. Right.
That's the shot. I know he had a 2-stroke lead going into that, but I was like, when I think of how he won that tournament, it's that tight lie on the green,
Okay.
chipping from one side to the other. So that'll be a fun one. I think, hole-in-ones kind of humbled me. The wedge is a lot easier to hole out with, so hopefully that one is more friendly to watch, but we'll see how that one goes.
Good luck with that one, John. Live from the Tout House, electric as always. My piece, of course, featuring the top 10 contenders for the Pebble Beach Pro-Am will be out on Golf Digest. If it's not out tonight, it'll be out first thing tomorrow morning. We're just going to chop a little piece, embed this video in it. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Drop us a comment. Let us know who you think is going to win the 2026 AT&T Pebble Beach. We will be back here next week. On behalf of John, I'm Joe Idoni. This has been another episode of Preferred Lines. Peace out, gang.